Still there.
You're not going to get into it.
Alrighty, good evening and welcome everybody. I think we are ready to begin the evening's deliberations. And let's begin with reports from the dais. UVA, any updates from UVA?
Thanks, Chairman. I do actually have a couple brief updates I wanted to share. And these are all capital project updates, but they're regarding upcoming housing projects. And so the first is I'm happy to report that Brandon Upper Class Housing 2, it's nearing completion, and it's slated for opening this summer. And that will bring 350 beds with the opening of that facility. And then we have the Darden Graduate Apartment Building is being brought to the Board of Visitors for final approval later this month, and that will begin construction shortly after with the tentative projected opening in 2026, and that's additional 350 beds. And then we have an ongoing collaboration between UVA and the UVA Foundation working on two affordable housing projects. The first is looking at the Piedmont neighborhood, and that site we're teamed up with the Piedmont Housing Alliance, and then we are also partnering with POAH, 10th and Wurtland, and I'll be happy to report more as those projects take shape. So,
Excellent.
Can I ask a quick question about that? Have our neighborhood association tried to reach out to POAH at one point, and they said the contracts hadn't been signed yet. Has that been finalized, or
my understanding is today I was told that everything is fully active and that they are now working within the community. So that's
Great.
what I was told today. So.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks. Mr. Bob.
Anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks. I had two meetings. First one was Citizen Transportation Advisory Committee, January 17th. We elected a new chair and vice chair, re-elected chair, and we had an update on the moving towards 2050 needs prioritization, as well as on the smart scale round 6. And on that, I believe there are, Rory might know some of this information or know more of it, but there are 3 projects that are identified and 2 that are potential projects, but they have not yet been identified like an actual project in the corridor. And those are the, let's see, 5 studies, Hillsdale South Extension, US 250 Barracks Road Exchange, and then Ivy Road 250 interchange, and something on the I-64 5th Street, exit 120. Second meeting was Tree Commission, met February 6th, and on that, RX Fire was a consultant that was awarded the invasive plant control for this next round, and they did a good job last year, so we're pretty confident in their ability. We are working on the State of the Forest report, probably towards the end of March, to be released to City Council. And the grant, the city was awarded a grant and formed a subcommittee to create an RFP for bid regarding the urban forest management plan and training volunteers.
The invasive species piece, was that a consultant, or was that the people, were these the
That's
people
our
that actually did the?
contractor.
Yeah, okay, got it. Mr. Zulhitz,
No report.
Mr. Duranzia.
I have 8 meetings
You're a busy guy.
to report on. Fortunately for everyone at this dais, I'm going to knock out 6 of them in one shot. That was the deliberative process by the CAF committee for CAF and HOPS allocations. We met essentially throughout January to pull those recommendations together, which we have. As we all know, we are way short on money, and there's always more applications than there are money. We also decided that at the conclusion of this round, i.e. in April and May, we need to update the methodology of evaluation to meet the new code And there are some things that have been amended and amended and amended, and we just need to start fresh. So that's on those 6. The HAC met in January to do a very fast review of the ADU manual, which we banged through, and I want to recognize the Vice Chair of the HAC, Sunshine Nathan, for an absolutely masterful conduct of that meeting. We got a lot done and sent it on, not perfect, but we are where we are. And the next matters for the HAC is going to be taking up the land bank. The Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission met earlier, met on Thursday. That was a wrap-up meeting for the year, a lot of financials for the year, a lot of turnover on the board, with people moving out and out of office and coming on in the outlying counties, and 3 matters regarding authorization to spend money to obtain grants to deal with transportation matters, including our bridge over the River Ravenna, in an attempt to, as presented previously, the budget for that had blown to a monstrous $40-something million. And we are working on a way to pre-collaborate and at least get our contingencies down to under $30 million. So there's that. And then the other 2 had to do with rideshare and such, and expanding those and developing those projects. That's what I got.
Mr. Stolzenberg.
Yeah, a couple things. First off, I apologize. Last month I said I had not had a LUPEC meeting and didn't have a report because I thought the LUPEC meeting was 2 days before our prior meeting. Actually, it was 2 days after. So I've got a double LUPEC update this time. Back in December, we talked about a couple things. Environmental resiliency and the ongoing Resilient Together planning effort for climate change resiliency between UVA, the county, and the city. And a presentation about the Albemarle's effort to kind of get a handle on all the dams around the county, mostly privately owned, some of which they have very little information on, and some of which may technically be state regulated, but they still don't have information on, and how to plan for flood resiliency related to that. It was actually sort of horrifying. How little information there is about all these dams that could be potentially dangerous. And then in January, our LUPEC meeting, we discussed essentially the 3-party agreement that is the basis, that is why LUPEC exists, and is the basis of cooperation between 3 entities. So we had a great presentation from David Benish from the county about the history of it. And then there was some discussion about how it was working, and there's some interest in revisiting it to an extent to perhaps further define how some of the processes are supposed to work. In many ways, that the agreement is vague and says things like, we'll submit plans that are submitted to the city for rezonings, we'll submit them to the other party, but it doesn't say what that process is. And maybe that gets more defined in discussions moving forward. Separately, we had an MPO Tech meeting in January. Cream discussed a bunch of it. Round 6 of Smart Scale is not looking good. The criteria were changed to be very restrictive, especially for MPO and PDC submissions, and we just do not have a lot of projects in the pipeline that are submittable, in part because we, since the 2045 long-range transportation plan was adopted, in the first couple of Smart Scale rounds, we got a lot of stuff funded, and so we took a lot of stuff off the plate, and we're kind of down to the dregs of our 2045 plan. So it's good that moving towards 2050 is well underway, but one of the few projects that we had left was the Hillsdale South project to connect sort of behind Kroger by Dominion, where Hillsdale currently ends at Hydraulic, down to Angus or Holiday. And unfortunately, we can't just resubmit that, even though it's fairly close to being scored, because we need, the requirements for the interchange justification report have changed, and so we would need a new interchange justification report, and there's no time to do that before the submission deadline. So that's a loss. Many of this pipeline study, or the Barracks pipeline study, may have some projects. The Ivy pipeline study is much further behind and probably won't have projects. So probably nothing there until next round. The big one that is likely to be submitted is a diverging diamond interchange on 5th Street at 64. And I've been assured that there are ways to make it bike ped friendly, so it doesn't just become a barrier for everybody in the southern part of the county. But it will take some careful work to make sure that happens. And I think, previously we had submitted and lost on the more or less from like the Holiday Inn or the city line down there, a little south of the city line, up to Harris Street, that whole chunk by Fifth Street Station Parkway that's a bit of a mess. And we are not going to resubmit that as is, but we had some discussion about perhaps potentially incorporating some amount of improvements in that area into this DDI part. So if we do make that bike friendly, and the county is making like shared use paths and stuff down there, that we can complete that gap to get up to Harris Road. But we'll see how that goes. Could be tricky.
So the traffic circle on the Hillsdale, that's not impacted by this, is it?
No, though actually that was another thing that made reapplying tricky. I think in engineering design of that traffic circle, it was moved slightly to the east, I want to say. And so where the original Hillsdale South would have met the traffic circle is no longer where the traffic circle is. So Hillsdale South would have required more engineering work now to be able to resubmit it, even if that interchange problem hadn't happened. So there's pretty much no hope for Hillsdale South at this point in this round. So.
All right. Mrs. Schwartz.
Okay, since I was not here in January, I've got 2 BAR meetings to report on. December, the big thing was that we started our discussion on updating the guidelines. So that is in progress. The only thing of interest, we've had other applications, but the big one of interest in January was a new 7-story, a preliminary discussion for a new 7-story building on West Main Street that would wrap around Mel's Cafe. So it was an interesting discussion, and it was interesting to see how the new zoning code might look on West Main Street. And the BAR was pretty supportive of the project, of the massing. We had a lot of discussion about the way the building was, the facade was treated, more so than the massing. So at least in this instance, the height did not seem to be an issue. That's it.
Right, let's see, one meeting on my part, and that was with Parks and Rec. Lots of stuff talked about in the meeting. We talked about things ranging from the CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan, updates on that, to dogs in the park. But we also we're going to be talking about dogs in the park again, and dogs in general in Charlottesville. So I'll be reporting more on that probably next meeting or meeting after next. There's a lot of interest on both ends as it relates to dogs in the park and days when dogs can run around without leashes and when they have to be leashed. So more to come on that. We did talk about the Meadow Creek Parkway trail plan, and that is the objective of that is just to connect a lot of the parks throughout the city. And I copied you guys on the PowerPoint on that, so I won't go into detail on that. Though one thing that piqued my interest in, Mr. Bob, maybe you can help me with this, is the tree study update. The RFP has been awarded, and the objective of that is just to, and this is on the mall, it's just the mall. The objective of that is to just look at the state of the trees on the mall. There are about 91 trees that we're going to be looking at. And I think the bulk of these trees were planted in 1976. And I think most of them are willow oak, the trees. Yeah, and so, interesting, they're in differing states of health. At the end of the day, we may have to take a few or many of them out. The difficulty will not be taking the trees out. The difficulty will be managing the root structure under these trees. What happens after these trees are no longer there and the roots then have to be managed? So that's going to be a challenge. Ms. Creasy, is there anything from NDS?
Well, we have a new ordinance coming out next week, so that's pretty big. We've been doing a lot of administrative activities trying to make that process somewhat smooth. We'll see how it goes. We'll be ready, and we have a coordination meeting on the afternoon of the day after to make sure we can assess what's happening and try and help everyone out to make that work. The final draft, even though it says draft, we need to take the word draft off. That's on me. Somebody pointed it out today. The final code is online right now. We also have the final zoning map in a PDF form. It's all under zoning. So if you go to the city website, you put zoning in the search engine, it's the first thing you get. So this is actually a clear path. And we have a PDF exhibit on the zoning map, and we have a PDF of the map. Then we have an exhibit that takes off the overlays, just from some people don't like the busyness of all the overlays when they're looking at things. And we're underway with the GIS updates, so that will be an option too. But that's not online quite yet. So anyway, little steps as we go, and when we're live next week, we'll still be getting stuff up there. So if you see things that look weird, or wondering about a resource or something, just let me know, and we'll work ourselves to it. So we have that, and we are taking a little break from work sessions for the next 2 months, and council has taken our dates for those work sessions, but I am going to post them, so commissioners are more than welcome to attend, whether you do it virtually or in person. The first one on the fourth Tuesday, February 27th, they're going to be talking about alternative fuel study. And then on the fourth Tuesday in March, on the 26th, they're going to be talking about decarbonization study. So I know there are a lot of people here that are very interested in those topics, and we'll make sure that you have the information for those meetings.
And by posting the meeting, that will enable us to have
Attend.
more than 3.
Right, so if more than
or
3
2,
people go in the room,
Okay.
you'll be okay because it'll be posted for that.
But we are not participating, we are there to listen in
Correct.
these meetings, correct? Okay.
With the new ordinance being posted online, well, so it's like a PDF now. Will it eventually be on Municode, or?
So, you wanna?
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, you can answer it, but I can say, no, we're not intending to put it on Municode. Municode, at this point, isn't equipped to handle the formatting and illustrations as presented in the code. We also see an advantage in our ability to actually more readily update the code as compared to our experience of Municode over the last several years. But the PDF document is fully searchable, and the table of contents is not archived, it's bookmarked essentially within the document.
Yep, so follow-up question. The existing code as of today, will that be archived somewhere that we can
Yes.
see it and not on a shelf in NDS?
Yes.
It will still be on the internet?
Yeah, so we're looking at 2 options. One is that Municode has an archive, we believe has an archive capability, so that's kind of the first choice.
Mm-hmm.
The second choice is that we PDF it and just put it on our website.
Okay, cool.
That's it.
All right, with that, I think we're ready for matters to be presented by the public. This is an opportunity for the public to talk to us about the work we do. Ms. Creasy, will you be moderating?
I will, and I did not log myself in, so I'm going to do that now, because we are likely to have interest from our virtual audience to want to speak this evening. So while I'm doing that, I'll provide the instructions. During Matters from the Public, we have the opportunity for people to speak for 3 minutes. Matters from the Public is any topic that's not on the agenda for public hearing. We have no public hearings tonight, so any topic is an eligible item for this evening. Hold on. Okay. And so we will begin with our in-person audience, and then we will move to our virtual audience. And if you're in our virtual audience and you're interested in speaking, please raise your hand in the application, and we will call you in order of how it comes forward. Sorry, lost the word there. All right, do we have anybody in person who is interested in speaking? I don't see anyone in person at this time. We do have a virtual speaker. Our first speaker is Heidi Berthal. Heidi, are you able to hear us?
Yes.
Okay, Heidi, you can begin.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Heidi Divya Bertu, and I live at 1206 River Vista Avenue, contiguous to the Mount View PUD project. Last week, I sent you a list of requests for improvements to the site plans, along with a list of supportive neighbors. We know we can do a whole lot better than what has been designed. And we persist in caring for our neighborhood and the city and ask for direct and meaningful dialogue with us, the residents, that you represent before going any further with these plans. I had included a link to a recent article where the mayor and city manager said they support using community benefits agreements. This is encouraging to us. Last year, a Charlottesville developer allowed a neighborhood association to help them design a new building project in the Fifeville neighborhood. We did reach out to the Mountain View developer, Bryce Craig, directly. Unfortunately, that conversation was only brief. Many Locust Grove neighbors have given input to the city on this project, and many of us do not feel heard or engaged with. As we said in the letter to you, we understand the need for increasing housing in the city. We do not object to that. Actually, many would like to see more affordable housing than this plan calls for. This plan has taken a mostly green space and almost entirely paved it over. For me, the existing magnificent ancient trees have me fired up. The plans call for complete removal of all trees. Some are easily 250 to 300 years old. Have you seen them? They are historical and biological treasures that are being tossed callously. The design could be altered quite easily without losing any housing. In fact, the trees on the northern border should be the focal green space, the park that distinguishes this development and is planned around them. If there is a will, they could be properly cared for. These multi-serviceable trees are our lungs, our shade, our stormwater buffers, the home to many critters, and our beauty, and it's not too late. This plan has too much pavement, increasing urban heat. The stormwater plans could be much improved with more consideration of the nearby Rivanna. The access roads we consider very unsafe. Among us is a landscape architect, hydrologist, and other architects. We bring informed skills and care to this table. We are your natural resources. Use us. Will you give us serious consideration as essential partners in creating a better plan for Mount View PUD and our city? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, in-person audience, any speakers? Okay, I'll check back in with our virtual audience. Do we have any additional speakers in our virtual audience? Please raise your hand in the application. All right, Chair, we have no other speakers at this
All right,
time.
well, then we will close the public hearing and move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Durancio, do you have comments on the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. I would move that, we accept the consent agenda with the correction to the January 9th, 2024 regular meeting notes as presented by email earlier, which transposed two numbers. And as a side note, I'll be abstaining from the 22 minutes.
And I believe there's one other abstention, at least, maybe two.
Yep.
I'll be abstaining from item 3, the preliminary site plan, 501 Cherry Avenue.
I need to recuse myself from that as well.
Okay, Mr. Zoliotz, do you second?
I do.
All right, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, aye.
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 Any abstentions? We've noted abstentions have been noted. Any objections? And Ms. Creasy, the consent agenda has been approved. We are not having a public hearing tonight or a joint meeting with council, so I'm going to gavel us out of the planning commission and now gavel us into the ECRB. There are a couple of topics that we will be reviewing. The first is one that we'll need to present a vote on, and that's 2117 Ivy Road. But then we will have a chat with the applicant regarding the verb. So I believe Mr. O'Connell is managing, or is it Mr. Warner managing the Ivy Road? Is that Mr. Warner?
Sorry, I heard O'Connell. I thought Gary O'Connell. And it's like, he hasn't been here in a while, so late. But I'm Jeff Warner. I'm the preservation and design planner and serve as the staff for the Entrance Corridor Review Board. Michael, good to see you. I heard your name and I know him, but well, welcome to the fray. So what, the first item before you tonight is a COA for a certificate of appropriateness request for an entrance corridor project, and that one will, or at least the request is for you to take formal action, and then the other is a preliminary discussion on the Verve project. So just to introduce this, first, 2117 Ivy Road, this is a COA request. The project is within an entrance corridor, so and per the ordinance, you all serve as the design review body for projects within an entrance corridor. And to be clear, because of, this project was a result of a PUD that was approved earlier this year, and under what we would say the current zoning ordinance, or the pre-February 19, 2024 ordinance. So the code sections that we are using are from that ordinance, but the new updated ordinance, your purview and the standards for review are all essentially identical, just renumbered a little bit. So it's not as if when we look at something new, it'll be completely different. So a bit of background, this is COA request for development of a roughly 1 acre parcel on Ivy Road and Copley. There's an existing 1974 bank. It will be raised, and the project will construct a 10-story apartment building that's oriented to Ivy Road, have a footprint of approximately 140 feet wide and 310 foot deep. It's a brick, metal, and composite panel building. It features an 8-story tower that sits atop a 2-story podium. On the east side, facing Copley, which is the east facade, above that 2-story podium, there's a section of the upper floors that's set back, creating an inner courtyard. Facing from Ivy Road, above the podium, floors 3 through 8 are cantilevered out slightly above the podium, and then step back again at the 9th and 10th floors. There is an interior enclosed garage, which is accessed from Copley Road. And there's a secondary entrance to a garage area on Ivy Road that is, and it's not connected to the internal garage, but that's where service vehicles, trash, and recycling will be stored. There are no known historical structures or resources associated with this site. We know that in the 1960s and starting probably in 1959, there was a gas station that operated here, the Colonial Amoco Service Station, but nothing prior to that relative to historic buildings or any buildings. The staff review on this, and other than the comments that are in the staff report and some of the recommended conditions, staff finds the proposed design is appropriate, recommend approval of the COA, and again, with the conditions discussed. The design is generally consistent with the design guidelines relative to architectural design, form, style, relative to building place, materiality, and color palette, and the design features variation and materiality in the materiality and the color palette. The big thing, the on-site parking will be concealed within the building, which is a solution consistent with the design guidelines. And that entrance is on Copley Road, which is not an entrance corridor, but it's still, because of the project, everything is being reviewed as an EC. The future evolution of this entrance corridor, and the reason I'm offering this is the current, if you will, entrance corridor guidelines were drafted and adopted prior to the current comprehensive plan, so there are, relative to specific corridor recommendations, things have obviously changed with the comp plan and with the new zoning. So just to make sure that everyone understands that. So whereas I think 3 to 5 story buildings have been sort of the vogue in town and corridors, but now we're looking at a maximum 10-story height building that was established by council's approval of the PUD, and also the height reflects the revised comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2022 and is consistent with the anticipated trend of buildings that will be taller, larger, and with smaller setbacks than what is existing in this corridor and what was envisioned under the prior comprehensive plan. So my notes, and the applicant is here to discuss the design and answer any questions, but one of the conditions I noted was to address the street trees on the Ivy Road side. There's currently some existing overhead utilities. Those will be undergrounded. I don't know where. I don't know what the result will be of what's in the ground, certainly with possibly existing utilities. And also there's willow oaks are large, but we have them on the mall. So I had raised the question of, are they appropriate spatially for the space that's left for it? So I suggested a condition that simply states the tree species here, when they are selected, will be coordinated with UVA's landscape plan, and that has been something they've been working on. It will meet the city's site plan requirements, and most importantly, will be trees from the city's tree list and appropriate for the conditions in space, both above and below grade. An additional comment, in conversation today with Mr. Stoltenberg about rooftop screening and where will things be located, I think it would be fine considering adding a condition that all rooftop mechanical equipment, and I'm just paraphrasing my thoughts, but all rooftop mechanical equipment will be located within an area of the rooftop screening, or the equipment will not be taller than that screening, and the screened equipment area will be whatever distance from the parapet you might like to see. And then the other things, and I circulated these middle of last week, not changes to design, but some clarifications I discussed with the applicant. One is there's some transformers on Copley Road, a proposal to use those as a canvas for some public art. They shared a bicycle theme, but I don't think they've selected anything. So I think in your discussions, if you have any issues with those or not, but I think it would be fine. I'm comfortable with, if you're all right with a decal being used of some type, allowing me some administrative discretion on that. So you can account for that however you would like. They also included some information about the balconies, and one option showed a hanger rod and a clevis. I haven't ever had to use that term, but so angled rods coming out from the wall. Whether or not they'll use that in the design, I think, is to be determined. I don't think there's a problem if they did, as long as it was done consistently, but it's something that if you all want to address, if you have issues with it or don't like it, speak about it now. I had asked them about the mortar in the podium brick, and there was reference to a dark mortar, but it will be, just to clarify, a mortar that will match the brick. So whatever the color of the brick is, the matching mortar. I did receive today an email from a resident in the Lewis Mountain neighborhood expressing concern about the design, traffic, et cetera, that I know has been circulated to you by Mr. Mitchell. You all are welcome to address that. But the questions that were raised, really given the approvals of this, the components of this project, the approvals by council, I can't recommend a change in the height. I can't recommend a change in the setbacks. And then there were other comments about traffic and parking, and those do not fall under the purview of the ERB. So, and with that, I know you want to keep moving. Any questions for me about?
Please.
Exhibit A7, I think the north elevation, there's a wall labeled "Wall for Discussion," which I guess is a conceptual wall?
Exhibit.
Free speech wall. It's marked A7 in the lower right-hand corner.
It says it.
On the drawing.
Yes.
The north elevation, and I think the west elevation, and both have that marking.
Could you help me understand what that means?
Help you? Well, all right, so first off, these are really tiny, and I'm realizing I can't read them. Point to me on the elevations. There's 3 elevations on A7, and there's some notes, and there's some...
So it's on that white wall on the bottom.
Yeah, it's drawing number 1 on that sheet. It's the bottom.
Okay, so that is
directly above where it
right,
says
that's
west elevation.
to the back of... Well, it's not Food of All Nations, there's like a barbecue place there. So this is going back down towards the rail tracks. It's down below street level, and whatever retaining wall will be necessary there will be I believe they're calling it a board formed, so a rough formed poured concrete wall. It's not visible, but I don't have any problem with that.
What's up for discussion? They have to have a wall there, right? Or do they not have to have a wall there?
Well, I can let
Well,
them
maybe they'll
discuss
tell
that,
us.
but
Okay.
again, this is, your purview is what's visible from the entrance corridor. This is down behind, below grade, or lower than grade. So if you think it could be a similar, would be the walls at, 1709 JPA, when we talked about those large retaining walls, and the recommendation was to consider some sort of cascading planting on that. So, but I don't have an issue with a poured. I mean, it's not stacked block. It's used the board so that it has the sort of some texture to it. If you all think that they could use some cascading landscaping, you can certainly address that. But I didn't see it as a problem.
I think the question is, I think by optional wall, it means if there is no wall, what is in its place?
Could probably let the applicant when they present.
Yeah, I don't, I'm not here to defend the design or not. You're just saying that what that wall is at the rear there, if it gets built and as it's shown, the material's fine, and, but why it's being built, hand it off to them. Anything else that I can answer?
Question to both you and Rory, this roof visibility and things being shorter than the screening, why are we doing this? It's a 10-story building with some cantilevers. None of it's going to, basic geometry says you're not going to see anything on the roof of the building.
And that was my conclusion on that. I think your review is what do you see from the entrance corridor?
So
not
a general
floating there.
statement, not visible from the street. blah,
And
blah, which it isn't.
again, this
Well,
goes
is that what it says?
So
or-
just to be clear, I don't
Yeah.
necessarily see the need for a condition there. My question was, it wasn't
Well, it
about, it was
right,
a
it was
concern
where-
about
it
the
was
screening
where,
exactly,
right.
was that I couldn't tell where the screening physically even was, since it's not on the roof layout, but
And
it's
I-
in the elevation.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with what you asked and sort of the adding a condition to it. Carl will tell you on West Main, and there's buildings, BAR will go through, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, there's not this
Yeah,
big.
I mean,
You'll
because you can't see
things.
it on the street in front of the building doesn't mean you can't see it from 2 blocks away, sticking up like a sore
Yeah.
thumb.
So I think it's reasonable to, and discuss with the applicant, they've been great to work with so far. You could probably ask what could be done or how could best state it,
Yeah,
and I
well,
think it's reasonable.
I agree. I mean, it's a matter of measuring the hypotenuse and seeing
Yeah,
where it's
yeah.
reasonable. Like, okay, you're a quarter of a mile away to see the roof of that building. We're not, right?
The UVA streetscape plan that you referenced, what does it call for the Ivy
I
Corner?
don't know. I know that's been, the notes have said they've coordinated with UVA on that. I mean, I typically would just say, is it something from our tree list? And I simply asked, well, will that tree on our tree list fit there?
So why add the coordinate part and not just the tree list and space part?
Because one of the things that the guidelines do talk about is, integration of an entrance corridor.
What
It
if they
is-
make a landscaping plan and says, oh, and that lot over there should be a beautiful grass field?
Possibly, yes. Do we have those in the comp plan? So the idea of using elements of that streetscape, UVA's got, as you go up the hill towards the lawn, it's got the, a continuous type of light versus the city where we have all kinds of lights. So I think there's nothing unreasonable about suggesting that, and that's what the entrance corridor sort of hopes we work towards.
I mean, I guess if UVA, I don't think UVA would do this, but if they decided that all their street trees were going to be 8-foot tall dogwoods, I might have an issue with that.
There's nothing you could do, we can do if UVA
Right.
decides to do
Right,
what they want.
Do something with this one is what I'm.
But if what UVA proposed was not great and you and the applicant saw fit for a different tree to go there that was on the tree list, does that condition give you the discretion to say, well, you coordinated well enough, we're gonna go with?
Well, what I would do is we have requirements of the site plan, and so that's where the planners and, what's, zoning saying what's required. So I think the option would not be, you don't have to put anything here. So there is something that has to meet the site plan requirements. What species of tree it is at this point, to me, it will be what's on the streetscape, what's on our tree list, and what's appropriate for that location, whether or not it matches what UVA wants. Now, if something could be done that coordinates with UVA, that's great, but I'm looking at their willingness to work with UVA, commendable, but
And coordinated's a pretty fuzzy term.
you choose another word if you'd like.
Well, no, what I'm
no,
saying
I
is
think
that we want it fuzzy. It's coordinated, but not dependent upon, dictated by, or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not sure that fully
It does,
answered, but
no,
it's,
it does. It's
to
enough
me,
that I can
when
go
I,
for.
when I looked at this a couple weeks ago, and I saw where council had required like the space between the curb and the face of the building, it came down to, well, what will fit there? And, it's a question I have about a lot of projects, what tree will fit there? Like over at 1301 Wharton, a little surprised when Sentinel ginkgos were taken off the tree list, and that's what will fit in some of these places. So I'm going to go see what they come up with when they know what's underground, overground, and what fits in that space, and if it's appropriate, and the planners and zoning say it's appropriate, I'll sign off on it.
Right.
Jeff, I had two questions just from your evaluation of the drawings. One regards the transformers that are located on Copley. I know in the entrance corridor design guidelines, it's clear to have infrastructural equipment not be located in sort of public visible areas. These are both public and visible. And speaking on behalf of UVA, which is the adjoining neighbor, this is they're prominently visible from the development immediately across the street. And so there's general concern about the location of that. And furthermore, the real concern that I've had reviewing the plans is that there's been public comment and also acknowledgement of the challenge of entering the parking deck along Copley and the limited sight lines. And I'm concerned that these transformers only further encumber and make the safety a greater issue.
So-
And I just want to point out, it's interesting in the renderings that they are not included in the visualizations that are submitted in this.
So this is, again, this is aesthetics, this is not a site plan, this is not the engineered drawings. What they'll have to do is complete a site plan, which identifies, line of sight, things like that. So Brennan Duncan won't allow something that has a blocked view, but that's, I don't know what's going on spatially, whether these transformers could go somewhere or not. I think it's an interesting idea. We do allow public art. We put murals and stuff and paint just about everything, every wall and section of wall you can find in the city. So I think from an art standpoint, that could be valid. I think that if something is an appropriate design, I don't know, in the downtown Atlanta, they have these giant fate rocks. If they had proposed that, I think I would have a significant problem with it. But something that treats it as a piece of art, a piece of public art, I'm inclined to consider it. But again, it's up to you all as a body. As far as entrance in and out of that garage, there was an initial discussion months ago about access off of Ivy Road, and they crossed the board in staff's like, no, that's not going to work. But the ERB does not, that's not under your purview. Essentially, where cars park or how they access this, those are site plan issues that are resolved. And it was to move that from Ivy to Copley was a positive. If it can be moved somewhere else on Copley, you can certainly ask, but that would have to be based on what the design guidelines say as far as the aesthetics go.
But visible, oh, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
and we'll take these notes to those who are working on the site plan as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. And the other comment I had about this sort of plan review, it has to do with the overall interpretation. You mentioned a 10-story submission. This documentation that was submitted calls out a bathroom on the roof. And my understanding with Virginia code is that if you have a bathroom.
I could stop you right there. It doesn't matter what the use is. This building could be a solid slab of concrete or one giant empty room. What we look at is the design.
Yeah.
So on that matter, if there's an issue with how that is visibility of that design, then it's under the ERB
Well, I was going
purview.
to say, if
But if
we're
it's
reviewing
zoning-
a 10-story massing as part of the entrance corridor, and we're looking at documents that show an 11-story massing, that would impact the perception and whether or not this conforms.
So the height as it is presented to you is what, and council reviewed drawings, and they even have, wall sections. So the height that's coming to you is what city council approved. So I don't have the latitude to recommend
Yeah,
a
they
change in
approved
height.
a max height, not a design.
Well, we can bring the planner in here who was involved in all of that. The other thing, as I said earlier, a COA does not equate to a building permit. It doesn't equate to an approved site plan. So this is the design, and sometimes they're conceptual, sometimes they're very detailed, but ultimately we would have to review a building permit. And the building permit would be looked at by the planner, engineering, by zoning, and if a project did not meet the zoning or did not meet what is allowed by this PUD, it wouldn't get approved. So,
Does it come back to this body if it's identified that it
well,
is?
we've got the director of planning here and the assistant director, so they can talk about those. I handle the design review, and I can, as I said, I know that the planner who may be online knows about this issue. I know Ms. Long, who's been involved in the project, knows about this issue far better than I. So I'm trying to say is if you all, as a committee, or as a board feel that the height should be different, you can do that. I can't recommend that you do, but you all certainly have the right to make recommendations in your approval, or you can deny the project, and realizing that all actions by the ERB are appealable to council. So even if you approve this tonight, it could be appealed to council. But I really don't want to get into the speculation about whether the zoning or what council approved is or is not right, or that these drawings don't represent what council approved.
You've suggested that height is under the purview of the ECRB. I do not believe it is. I do not believe we can alter the height. That has already been approved,
Right.
recommended by us and approved by council, so height is off the table right now.
Yeah, the irony is you all have probably seen this more than I have in all of the review and discussions last year, so.
And I think the general design of the building is a part of the PUD that was approved. And so certainly council saw the renderings with the height, but that is formally, as I understand it, kind of a proffered part of the approved PUD. Is that correct, Missy?
All right, this is my first time getting a chance to review that. I mean, I saw 10 stories and understand that PUD allows a 10-story structure, and I'm looking professionally at a building that's an 11-story structure, and I just wanted to understand is the PUD for an 11-story building or 10, and that's where the confusion is.
All right, why don't we invite the applicant to
Yes.
present?
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Julie Filgus. I'm with the Dwell Design Studio. I am the architect that is here to answer questions. Can you hear me?
Is it on? It is on, but you just need to get really close to it.
Thank you. I'm Julie Filgus. I'm with Dwell Design Studio, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and I know we have a list going. Would you like for me to just sort of answer the questions in the order they were asked?
Well, are you guys going to be presenting at all?
Actually, I wasn't sure as to your familiarity with the project. I'm happy to just give a quick overview, if you would like.
Visual, before we get into that would be of
Certainly.
great value, especially, you know, what the building looks like.
Is there a pointer? Oh, you do? Okay. Let's just get through it. So these are the drawings that were submitted for the entrance corridor review. So it's just our cover sheet, not terribly exciting. So this is, did you have a comment?
I'll save it.
Did you?
In that picture, why, if you go back, why is the top plants?
Oh, okay. So there is a glass railing at the top. And it's, yeah. And then we have plantings behind. So it's difficult to sort of see in the watercolory interpretation of it. So there is a glass railing there, and it's shown on the plans and the roof plans.
But in the roof plans, the plantings aren't all along. They're just in little squares, right? Yeah, I'm looking for the roof plans.
We're still working on the landscape plans.
Okay, all right, never mind. I'll save it for my comments.
On this page, you'll see the conceptual street section. And I know we had some conversations and there were some questions asking about the trees. So when we contacted the UVA University Architect, I actually looked at some documents that were in the public domain, and I noticed that with the Emmett Ivy Corridor project, that there was a very strong visual connection along Ivy Road with all the buildings on the corridor, and that there was a very visually prominent streetscape. So I actually asked the question, would you mind telling us, what the width of the green zone is, what the width of the sidewalk is, what the species of the tree is, and what the spacing is, because it would be a shame to just sort of halt that visual continuity. So at that point, we noticed that our green zone was not as wide, and our walk zone was not as wide. So we then made the change, which is shown here currently, to show a minimum 8-foot wide green zone and a minimum 10-foot wide walk zone, so that information that we received about the streetscape really helped us understand how to continue that visual continuity. We're hoping that we can use the same street tree species, but that's why we have the language in the street section saying we need to coordinate with site plan, ECR, and also UVA. So the intent is to provide a strong visual continuity, but the exact species we'll have to figure out when we figure out the logistics of burying the underground utilities, how big the root ball needs to be, what the maintenance issues will be. So we need to dig a little deeper and present that information in site plan review. There was a question that popped up in the pre-app meeting also. So, any questions about the site plan? No? Okay. So these are just surrounding buildings used as an example of context. And do we have any questions about these? I think everybody's very familiar.
It's not a white building, right? It's a red building now, right?
No, it's white.
It is white.
White brick.
Is it up yet?
Which one?
I think that
Starts construction.
red cylinder on the inside is brick.
It's wood.
That's wood. Oh, interesting.
Oak Harsh.
It looks just like the rotunda. I'm told.
It is a species color that's matched to match the red brick of the rotunda, but it's wood.
Okay.
Okay, so
Wow.
a bit of a lost. Okay.
Next. Thank you. More images of surrounding buildings. Next, please. Thank you. And here's the first floor plan for some context. The site plan that we showed you previously was the roof plan. So this just gives context of the streetscape and the entrance off of Copley into the garage, the entrance off of Ivy, and our amenity spaces. So the amenity spaces that you see, we've got the bike room, we've got a cafe, we've got the mail room, we've got the main lobby, and then on the floor above, we actually have the fitness area. So the intent was to really activate the corridor by providing some transparency and activity, and also screen the garage from view. Thank you. Here are the elevations. Any questions? Oh, this doesn't have the wall. Can we go to the next one with the wall? Thank you. Okay, so the question about the wall, and it was labeled as an optional wall. We were in the early design phases, and we were trying to decide whether or not we needed that wall structurally and also for drainage. And that's why we wanted to leave it there as an optional wall until we've solidified the design. Right now, what we're trying to do is eliminate that wall and continue the split-faced CMU. We think drainage will work better if we eliminate the wall.
So it's optional for discussion for you guys and not for us to discuss.
Well, no, actually, I mean, if somebody said that they loved it, I mean, great, but what we were trying to figure out the function of the wall, you know, whether or not it's going to hinder drainage. And what we found out in conversations with our civil engineer is that we want to make sure that we handle off-site drainage, and it's actually better if we don't have that wall there for the drainage.
Can you explain why? Just
The
a
off-site
short-
drainage?
Yeah, or just how having removing that wall. Because isn't there a wall immediately behind it?
They're gonna warp that area and for the drainage to flow through.
So
What, are you talking about a wall on the other side?
Well, I'm just curious, if the wall goes away, are the structural piers then, I'm curious what,
Oh, I'm sorry, if you look at the plan, so the property line is, at that location, it's about 5 foot 2 feet away. And so we were showing the retaining wall closer to the property line. So between the property line and the actual building wall, we were showing that. I think on plan you can see it.
So basically, you're proposing removing the retaining wall and letting the building wall.
The building
just
wall
carry
can,
down.
correct. And that leaves us space to handle the drainage from offsite, because we can work with the elevation that way.
Is there any impact on the adjacent property? On the one right up north? Would it matter for them? Drainage-wise or stormwater-wise?
The main concern is that area.
Just in the back, right?
Yeah.
why was it drawn, why did it first show up?
We weren't sure about the retaining portion of the building.
Okay. are you looking for us for guidance?
Well, what we would like to do at this point is eliminate it and use the split-face CMU, but the purpose of this is to have the discussion. I mean, do we have a strong opinion?
I mean, it doesn't impact the aesthetics, so I'm not certain we have it, at least in this board. In the ECRB, I don't know if we do, but.
I think it's just an additional material that you wouldn't see otherwise.
I'll say you're probably right that we don't have a direct purview over that, but the rear is, in my view, not a literal legal entrance corridor, but it is an entrance corridor, right? People entering the city by train on the Cardinal do see the back. So I would like you guys to consider the aesthetics of that, but I don't care if it's, I think the CMU looks good anyway, so I don't care about this specific question.
Great. Okay, so you could remove it as far as I, care.
Wonderful. Let's see. I believe we addressed the streetscape plan. And then, any other questions that we haven't addressed?
Let's go to the next.
Generator.
Oh, the screening. So we are assuming that depending on the placement of the mechanical units, which is something that we have to further incorporate in the design, we're assuming that if you are standing on the street and we've got a parapet, that you're not going to actually see them if they're located a certain distance away from the parapet. So typically, we try to place those as close to the corridors as possible, and then away from the edge of the roof for safety. So generally, the plan is to concentrate the mechanical units at the center of the roof, at which point, if you're standing on the street and we've got a parapet, they really are screened from view. So we'll use our 3D software to verify that, but the intent is the screening that's there right now is really more of a privacy screen. So that is screening the amenity space.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we have that, obviously, that rooftop amenity space, so the screening that you're seeing is truly just screening between that and the mechanical zone of the roof while you're on, using that rooftop space. It's not a equipment screen for street view.
And it's for privacy and safety. They don't want students wandering on the roof.
So, you said you were going to place it from the edge, but if I'm looking at this west elevation right at the bottom, it looks like it goes right up to the edge, right? On the right-hand side, and that is the street?
It's actually set further back.
It's further back from the street?
Correct.
So this is just outdated, okay.
Sorry, what exactly was your question? The fence?
The black screening fence on the roof, right? Is shown here as being up against the street edge?
No, along Ivy, there would not be that privacy fence.
Right, okay, it's just,
I think
that's
he thinks
what
it's
that
closer
but
than it is
it's
to the edge.
outdated, got it.
Yeah.
So, do you have more presentation, or is this question time?
I'm happy to answer questions.
Do you have the south elevation slide? I think it's probably one prior to the, well, I don't know if it's the same order as this one.
That's the one we looked at today.
The elevation, not the perspective.
Oh, go back.
That one, yeah, top right. So you described this glass railing as a sort of pseudo cornice in your contemporary building. So my question is, why doesn't it run the length of the building? Why is it just very slightly asymmetrical by cutting off like 3 panes on the left side?
That is due to function. So we're actually screening off the rooftop amenity, so that's for safety. So it's really functional in terms of, if we look at the roof
The
plan.
amenity space only goes up to there, and so there's no need to go any further?
Correct.
you say it's an aesthetic element as your pseudo cornice.
It is, but if you look at the language of the parapet, we actually stepped the parapet in various locations as well. So we weren't thinking that it was such a departure to step that or to not show it as a continuous element.
Okay.
Can we look at A4? I'd like to have you guys kind of walk us through the material you're looking at A4. It's like 3 slides down.
Yeah, it's at the end. Yeah, that's it.
Bingo. So tell us about this.
So the materials that we're using are a composite panel and a brick. The brick is at the base of the building. It's at the first floor and the second floor at Ivy and Copley. And it's a dark brick with a matching mortar. And the composite panel, we have...
It's a dark brick with a matching mortar. So the mortar's going to be red? Red?
Oh, no. The mortar matches the actual field. So if you look at BRK-01, it's manganese iron spot.
Okay.
It's manganese iron spot, and so we'll use a darker mortar with that.
Okay.
So it appears a bit monolithic with a little bit of texture. And then that works with the storefront as well. We're going to use a dark bronze or a black storefront. And then the panels that you see are composite panels, and we're using a combination of gray, and also we have a stacked bond pattern with the texture. And I think there was a question about the stacked bond pattern from somebody. The intent of the pattern is that it is stacked. I think there was maybe just a slight deviation in the tiling of the rendering. So the intent is that we don't want to show something that appears to be faux brick, but we wanted to show something that had a texture and a color that worked with the context of the surrounding area.
And sorry, did we? So I guess sent you guys a screenshot of how it staggers halfway up. Is
Not
that
intended.
That's fake? That's a rendering error.
That is correct.
It's going
Yeah,
to be straight up.
It'll be a
grid.
stacked bond pattern, correct.
And that pattern will not then in different parts of the panels. Okay.
That's not the intent.
Okay. Unless they install it horribly wrong. Okay, got it. I'll say having that rendering problem made it maybe difficult for me to visualize what this would look like with that grid pattern all the way up, because it just didn't look like a grid. I mean, it looked like a running bond in a lot of ways, but I'll use my imagination.
The goal was just to present texture and then to sort of hone in on it here. So the goal is to have some texture. And yeah, it is meant to be stacked bond.
With that material, and with the other fiber cement materials, well, first, just to confirm, the 2 grays are also, it's a horizontal banding, right? Like, not banding, but.
The panel?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're about like 18 inches high by 8 feet to 10 feet long, the panels.
But it looks like they're scored horizontally, is that?
No. So the gray panels
Yes.
are not scored at all.
Okay,
Only the red. We're trying to give,
okay. So the rendering, that's another thing with the rendering that was,
that might be the joints between the panels.
they look like they're about a foot tall. So I think it,
They're about 18 inches high.
18, oh. All right, maybe.
But the joints, there was a question about the joints.
Yeah,
I had a question about the joints. Didn't
Are you
ask
talking
me,
about,
but
are you talking about
have one.
the vertical?
no, I'm looking at the rendering that's on page A8, and it looks like there's a strong horizontal pattern, but this does relate to the joints, and I guess I'm,
Oh, you can pull up. It does. I see what you mean.
That's what he's talking
so what we would be seeing, I think I just heard you say, it would be an 18-inch high, or space between horizontal lines. That would
Yes, and you will barely notice it. It is a very subtle gap. They actually use a joint there. I think somebody asked a question about caulk. The owner really endeavors to provide a building that is as maintenance-free as possible, meaning also durable. So we don't want somebody up there having to re-caulk those joints. They offer a caulk-free joint, and it is a very, very thin reveal, and it appears to be the same color as the adjacent panel.
So we're
It's
going
like
to
a
see,
T-joint.
we'll see a very thin vertical reveal in all of these fiber cement panels.
At
and-
about 8 feet to 10 feet.
Okay. And the horizontal joints will just be, that's a lap?
It's not a lap. It's actually, it's a rain screen, and they actually, no, that is a
But it's-
T-joint.
it's kind of-
At the
it's
floor,
roofed.
there's flashing at the floor, but every 18 inches, it is actually a T-joint.
It's a,
They're butt jointed, and then there's a T-joint in between.
okay.
Sorry. Yeah, so they're all butt jointed panels. It's not like lap siding. They would just, it'd be butt jointed together, and then there's a T-clip in between, so that's the caulkless clip.
Okay. So so it's going to be the exact same joint, horizontal and vertical?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. I don't know why I thought they had like a, I'm not using the right term. It's not tongue and groove, but it looked like they were
You thinking like board and
shiplapped
batten or
almost.
something?
No, it looked like they were almost shiplapped on one of the details I thought I saw. I don't know where I pulled that up. I think it was a link that someone sent us, but, oh yeah, for the Ceraclad. All right, so it's the same little metal T will be running horizontally and vertically. Okay. Okay. I guess that's.
Questions?
Can we go to the front elevation, south elevation? Yes, top right. So I also asked you guys, send this to you, yeah, I did. So this middle black square situation, it seems to me like it's sort of, especially on that right side where it like runs a little bit longer than that vertical line from the edges of the windows establish. It's like creating this asymmetry in the front of that. Is that an intentional aesthetic choice? Or is that driven by like a building need, like getting light into the windows?
I think your comment is very astute. And I think it would look better if we took the gray at the right of that center mass and carried it down. So we can make the plan work. We basically have shown some articulation with the building by varying the thickness of the studs and the locations of the windows. And I think what you were suggesting, if I'm interpreting correctly, is that center mass looks odd where it stops at the third and fourth floor and does not connect. I would agree if that's what you're saying. And we would actually be happy to continue that because I actually think that's a very astute observation.
Yeah, I mean,
The intent was, I mean, it really is. The intent was that we would show, if we were going to favor one side of the window in terms of showing that massing and that recess with the darker panel, that we would do it to the right. And if you look as it moves around the building, it's shown on the right where it's shown.
On the left side.
And we just
Yeah.
simply didn't carry it through there, and I can't give you a good reason. I think it actually would look better if we did. I think that's a good observation.
And so when you say that on that, I guess
It
it's the
doesn't affect
third
the
and
floor
fourth
plan.
floor, you mean? You would,
Yeah, so,
would you make it like the windows in the left, or would you put the black all the way along for the whole length of?
I
what
think
is
it's
that
a stronger
square?
elevation if we continue the black down alongside the windows, as we've done in the other locations. We've sort of created a pattern and a language and a movement where we've got the recessed black panels to the right. If you look at the other, yes, thank you, yes.
So like this.
Would be down there, down on the, yep, exactly.
But not this part, or including that?
No, that part's actually recessed further
Yep.
back than
Okay.
this part. And so that just creates some interest and some shadow in that center portion. So I would actually just pull the gray down.
So it would be like
There-
this,
yes,
and this
that same
part,
language.
this is not recessed where this black cladding
The black
is?
is recessed, but not the entirety of it, just that area versus the mass in the
Versus
middle.
the whole.
Right, so all of the gray is recessed the same amount, so that entire mass in the middle is all recessed. Whereas we have these smaller locations and smaller masses, like where you have the pairs, like the twos. So there's a pair and a pair and a pair, and then all of a sudden we change the language in the middle for some interest, and then you go back to it when you get back around the side elevation, and you have the pairs that are joined.
Okay, I mean,
So I think it would actually be stronger to carry the language through and actually add that recessed panel, that black, on the third and fourth floor.
yeah, though I think if you did that, you would then have that same problem of breaking that vertical line up here. And I want to emphasize here that I'm not suggesting a change.
Well, we're here for conversation, and I don't think there's any architect, correct me if I'm wrong, that would say that they would never change anything when they're finished with it.
Oh, but there's lots that would say they'd never change anything on my impetus.
I saw the comment and I was like, touche. So the idea of the upper band, you're saying that it wouldn't continue. The idea is that it doesn't, because we were trying to come up with the base body cap reference to classicism. So it is supposed to be, it is intentionally broken horizontally there and there, but I do
Right.
think it would be a stronger vertical in that one little area.
Interesting. And would that be an administrative modification if they wanted to do that?
Well, I'll just say.
I'm not trying to make that a condition or not approve this
I'm
based
like
on.
secretly grinning inside because Rory and I know how much he loves learning about architecture, and it's really, this is,
He just sends me 60-page essays on cornices
cornices, thanks.
while I'm trying to work.
I was like,
but the reality is, as much as Rory will argue with me, he does see things, and he does see in 3 dimension in a way that and I think very sincere, Rory, that yeah, and also having watched architects go through studio, I mean, they're taught to just get shredded. So this has been a very polite conversation. I was going to just say that I think this is one of the most detailed discussions I've ever experienced with the ERB. So there's a couple of learning things moving forward that I'll discuss later. But I would prefer, given the attention that this is getting and that it's gotten, that you be very clear about what you mean, and even if that, take a 5-minute break and sketch it real fast. I'd be much more comfortable with that than tomorrow trying to watch the video and figure out what we discussed. Because too often down the road, as in like an hour later, memories fade. So my suggestion is sketch it, draw it, determine it, whatever is best, so that all the 3 of us agree with what. And then prior to that, though, I would make sure that the other members of the ERB are.
Yeah, if anyone else even likes what we're talking about.
If you're out on an island, let's not sketch anything, right?
I don't even know that I like.
we feel that that's a minor suggestion and also an improvement.
So what I'm hearing, and thank you for bringing the laser pointer, thank God. You're welcome. On the right-hand side, there's the,
Rory's gonna have it photoshopped in about 30
Yeah.
seconds.
About 30 seconds.
there's the black or the gray, there's a triple window. On either side of the triple window is a vertical band of black that will be extended down.
I think Mr. Stolzenberg will be very articulate when he puts together the motion to outline
Oh,
what
yeah.
we'd like to see happen.
There you go.
Gosh, I was getting ready to say I was convinced by Jeff that everything is subjective and fake, and I don't have any moral authority to do any of that.
We actually have this on paper.
I think you got enough folks saying, yeah, it's a good idea that you might want to get that included in the motion.
I mean, is this what you're saying you would do?
If I may, just,
Wow, he's fast.
yeah.
That's not what I envisioned, so now I'm just.
Which, I mean, it was not what I was thinking earlier, yeah.
That's what I was hearing.
I mean, that's what I'm hearing from you guys. I like it a
This
little.
was going to be continued, sorry, I'm touching.
Oh, I think they were saying that these would not be continued, and it would just be that part.
Continue the full black all the way down because that whole.
Okay, my bad, I see it right there.
Why not just get rid of that whole line to the right of the window, though? That would make it actually symmetrical. And maybe you're intentionally making it not symmetrical because that part isn't.
Well,
but
look at the red. So the red banding is the same width on each side,
that's true.
and it stands out more than the dark.
I'll give you
And
that.
if you look at the other elevations, it's sort of a language and a pattern, see how it sort of gets hit the right from these other elevations? So it's just a continuation with the theme on all the elevations.
So because it's recessed, it's gonna kind of read dark, like the windows will be
Yeah.
dark, so it'll be kind of just
Well,
a big.
I mean, that's why they're, like you're saying.
And that's why we selected the darker material too, because it accentuates the recess.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this solution though, even though you're right, this top is the cap and it's different, I feel like it still draws you to that like break in the vertical line, right?
Oh, so you're thinking if you
Versus
eliminate
doing
it,
something on that top that isn't necessarily the same material. I don't know. I don't want you guys to add more articulation. I think articulation is terrible, and you should just make the whole building that red brick. But which I can Photoshop up for you if you want. But
So
and by
why
Photoshop,
don't
I'm
we,
painting.
and I neglected to mention that they're actually recessed as well. So the top stories are recessed back several feet too.
Right.
So you're not going to make that visual connection with
That's
that
a
line.
good point. Yeah.
before we continue designing this for you, why don't we see if there are any more questions, and then we can get into designing.
I had a question for, I guess, Jeff, since you're up here. On that, since it's actually not red brick, what are your thoughts on that material instead of brick, which we'd like to think of as a noble material?
This is why it was always good having a contractor on the PAR that could say, oh yeah, I've used that, it worked or didn't work.
It's a lot lighter.
It's a difficult, code building's a good example. That was going to be brick, and then they came back with a brick tile. Aesthetically, the result's identical. And you and I've talked enough, I look at something, that it's not stucco is like the first thing I go, hooray, because I just hate when I see something like that. But the material is a durable material, at least, the ceramic versus stucco. But I don't know how any of these things are going to age. I don't know, but, we have brick buildings that age poorly, so, I'm okay with it, but like I said, I'm not an expert in it.
What made you guys go with that stacked bond, like the grid, rather than more of a? Because I feel like that's going to make it, even though it's brick shaped sort of. I feel like that's going to distinguish it from brick, which might be a good thing because it's not brick.
Yeah, I'm a purist when it comes to brick. It's either brick or it's not. And so the idea was to impart some texture to the building, reminiscent of brick, but we did not want to mimic the traditional UVA brick and fail. So the idea is that there's some texture applied, and we're using the stacked bond look so that it's not trying to mimic it so closely. I think if you try to do faux brick panels, I think that would be a horrible failure. So the idea is that visually you still see a little bit of the color and a little bit of the texture, but it really, I don't think, appears as brick. I've actually seen larger portions of this texture, and it really reads more textural.
Let's also remember that although the joints will be very small, it is going to be tiled. So they wouldn't be able to successfully do a running bond pattern.
Mm-hmm.
This will camouflage the joints much more.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a lot easier to cantilever that also off. That's the first couple of floors since they're recessed in.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Well, and then maintenance has come up. You don't have to repoint this. If we were to use traditional brick, there would be some maintenance involved with that as well, and also structural issues. So we're using it down on the first and second level, where you can really experience the brick at a pedestrian level. So that's why it's used down there.
Sounds good. My other question was on generators and the 3 generators on Copley. Is there an alternative location for them that is out of view?
The transformers?
The transformers, sorry, not the generators, yeah.
I knew what you're talking about. It is a really tight site, and there's really not a great location for that. We have to have a generator as required by code. And really, one of the best locations for the generator room is close to that, and that all wants to be located in close proximity. And there's just really not any room on the site.
They're talking about the transformer, the 3 transformer boxes outside.
Yes, and the generator room is behind it, so, so you really want those functions
Next to
nearby.
each other.
Yeah. And also in terms of access, you know, Virginia Power wants good access. They want 10-foot clear in front of there. They want to be able to come in and do what they need to do, and it would be a challenge if we placed it somewhere else in terms of actually servicing them. But as mentioned before, the intent is to apply artwork.
Please.
Do you have more?
I can keep talking about that. I can come back to the transformers, but go ahead.
Are you sure? You're welcome to finish.
Have we ever accepted transformers out? Jeff, I'm looking at you, really, without screening or anything like that, and what sort of precedent?
You should go take a look at the new Belmont Bridge. There's quite a large transformer right out in the corner right there.
I'd say if we can make it a really nice public art piece, then it is fine with me. But if you
For
go
the-
with a wrap route, I mean, I don't know if I'm super excited about that.
Not in love with the Windows XP one, but
I think with, honestly, with the current, with the ordinance we have now and the reductions in setbacks, and I think we have problems where we put a lot of things, including trees. You know, Dominion Power doesn't let you put its transformers inside a building. And its location is a function of, well, you architects know, but I'll also say, I mean, these were shown on, I'm looking at some of the early drawings, and the transformers are there, so it's not, these didn't pop up out of nowhere. And I think, well, I said, I have some notes we can discuss in a bit, but.
I mean, I think there is a valid point that is the UVA's project over there has that like greenway that kind of opens up to this building, and then smack right in the middle are the transformers. So I agree that that's less than ideal, but also there's not much to do about it. So I think the art idea is a great idea, but you have to execute it well, which, don't ask me how to do that.
We actually thought it might be fun to do something referencing bicycles or multimodal transportation, because it's been such a huge topic of conversation, and we've got the bike room located in close proximity.
Maybe a really bad question to ask, but the applied graphics on these containers or whatever, how graffiti proof or graffiti cleanable are they? Do we know that?
We have
Someone-
not specified the manufacturer, but I know of manufacturers that produce those, and they call them graffiti proof.
Okay.
I'm not sure how graffiti proof, but basically they've been tested for just that
Okay,
reason.
great.
Mrs. Joy, you were attempting to get in the game.
Oh, sure. No, I'm just happy to go through all at once. So we touched on the transformers. I just wanted to ask one follow-up question. The wrap, has that been confirmed with Dominion that they allow wraps on their equipment?
It is not. We're in process of having those conversations, and it was actually noted on the PUD
Okay.
as such.
I've been clear about the sort of the desire to not have those in the location, and there's also concern about the adjoining trees and potentially the one immediately to the left that's shown in the site plan, whether or not that would actually be possible given the proximity to the equipment. Moving on, I've noticed in the rendering, there, along the bike storage, there is what appears to be a window wrap or a decal of a bicycle shown in the rendering. And again, I'm just getting up to speed with the entrance corridor design guidelines, and I know keeping clear glass is a preference, and so I just wanted to make a note. It's unclear how much of the storefront is being proposed to have a wrap in the documents that we were provided. I look at the ground floor, there's other elements situated there, a mail room and other things, so it's the generator, it's not entirely clear, because in the renderings, it appears to be all glass, but then in the programming, it appears to be a mix of some programming that may not want to be clear glass, and so it's hard to know what we're approving here. The next comment I had to do in the site plan. This is another discrepancy with the renderings and uncertainty with the elevation. In the site plan, you can clearly see exterior piers along right at the corner of Copley and Massey, Copley and Ivy, and they don't appear to show up in the rendering. And similarly, as you head up around the bridge, there's additional piers that are shown. My first question regarding the piers, again, because they're not in the renderings, are they intended, and I looked at the elevations, they don't have a call-out tag. Are they intended to be concrete, or will they be brick clad?
Well, this actually goes to the fact that we're in the early design phase. We're still working with the structural engineer on the cantilevers. So the intent is to cantilever as much as possible, but I'm sure that we're going to end up having to have some sort of columns, and the intent is that they would be clad in brick.
Okay. Because I noticed the texture is not there, and there's no specific call-out tag. And I know you have board form concrete as one of your elements. I just wanted to confirm that those piers, if exposed, if they end up staying in the project, that they would be clad in brick.
Are you talking about the north
Yes.
elevation?
It shows up in a couple places. So if you look at the site plan, it's hard to see. I don't think you can pick them out in the elevation very easily, but it's best to look at the site plan, which is, I'm trying to see, it's on,
Just a big dark square.
yeah.
Go further down.
Yeah, it's page 45 in the packet, but A5.
Site plan.
So if you look over where it bends just to the right of the garage entry, you can see there's 4 exposed piers along the property line there. And then if you go along to the to the south, closer to Ivy, there's another one right by the primary entrance to the retail commercial space. And they don't appear to show up in the renderings. And so I just wasn't sure what the intent was with those exposed structural elements, because they don't look wider in the plan, so it didn't appear that they had cladding on them.
Yeah, the intent is that the ones that we do need, and actually I think we've been in conversation with the structural engineer about eliminating at least one of them. But again, we're still working on the actual calculations, but the intent is that they're wrapped in brick. And we'll remove the board formed concrete from that materials board, or we're happy to stipulate
Was
that
that
there's
just for
none.
the wall? Was that?
The only intent for that was the wall, which we will be removing. So we're happy to say that there's no board formed concrete finish.
Okay. In regards to the hanger rod and clevis at the balconies, again, this is just a subjective take, and just being a joining neighbor, I think it'd be preferred to not express the hanging rod and clevis. I will defer to the voting members of the commission on whether or not they have a specific concern about that. The proposed, let me look at this. Oh, and then, I appreciate the improvements, and the university appreciates the improvements to the streetscape, the intent to sort of match and align the sidewalks. I think that is going to be a great asset to the local community and to the students that are here. It really will make it feel like a cohesive extension of grounds. So I think that's been a great improvement. As we move up that facade on Ivy, there was a step back that was proposed, I think, when it went back for its PUD approval. And, I just wanted to touch on, having spent some time on West Main and looking at other recently approved entrance corridor bill projects, and looking at the language that's in the entrance corridor design guidelines. And it's unfortunate that the step back isn't more pronounced. I think what's being shown here is more of a surface articulation and not a true step back. And so, I look at a similar 10-story property at the Draftsman, and sort of the successful step back that happens lower in the building there, I think really does wonders to tying it into existing lower rise context, which this project is surrounded with on, 3 of the sides. And so it's just something I wanted to point out. And then similarly, the last comment I had was the western facade. It appears to be the least articulated as far as architectural interest, and some would argue it may be the most visible as an entrance facade coming into the city. You know, no specific comments there other than that it doesn't seem to have the same level of architectural interest and variation that you see on the other facades. And so just felt inclined to point that out because I think that will be many people's sort of first moments when they feel like they're starting to enter into Charlottesville City, because you'll start to see a higher scale of development. And it's, just wanted to point that out. That's all I have.
That's it. All right, why don't we begin our dialogue, working our way to a motion. So why don't we just begin with the architects? Mr. Schwartz.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I got a lot of good comments brought up, but this, again, because we're not the BAR, and this is the Entrance Corridor Review Board, our guidelines are a lot less strict. So I actually don't have many concerns with this project. I believe it's well done. I think for future applications, something to request from an applicant, when we have a material like this, I would like to see the joint pattern on the facade, even if it's not going to be visible when it's complete because the joints are so tiny. But that's that would have been helpful on this one, but it's not going to hold me up. I do have a concern about the trees, just that I would like to see them there, and I'd like to see them be as big as possible. And I think that's everybody's goal. I just want to make sure that we don't get to the end of this and there's 4 crepe myrtles or 4 dogwoods or 4 something that's just pathetic because of site plan issues. I don't know how we craft that into a motion. I'm always very optimistic, probably overly optimistic about how large a tree you can cram next to a large building, but I do feel like you see this in urban areas all the time where people put very large street trees and they just grow away from the building, and then end up growing over the street, which is what we're actually trying to achieve. So whatever language we can come up with to make it a little more forceful that they try to find something large, I think would be preferable. Is staff's recommendation about lighting, I think we definitely need to include that. I think the applicant has answered all my questions. So yeah, that's me. That's it.
Mr. Joy, anything additional? Anything else? Anything else? We're beginning to craft a motion, and we just thought you've thrown out a few.
I feel like I've covered my comments, but I did want to talk a bit about, I know the design is trying to be set, but I do want to acknowledge that, the opportunity to sort of revisit some of the step backs along Ivy and how that would be positively received by neighboring community as well as the university. And I just don't want to lose sight. I think it would make for a more compatible project to the existing context and, add architectural interest into the design that's proposed here. So.
Thank you. Mr. Lab.
I agree with all the staff's recommendations. I'm okay with leaving the tree language the same way as it is in staff's recommendation, and knowing that we'll try to get as big of a tree as we can with that language.
Okay.
I am also looking at that facade driving down Ivy towards the city, and it is a big kind of blank white clad portion of the building right here. Not sure what I would change design-wise, but I can live with it.
Okay. Mr. Duranzia.
I don't have any serious queries or questions about this project. The variations that we've been talking about seem to me to be, they're not de minimis, but they don't seem to be driving any sort of main aesthetic concerns that I have, which are not really there anyway. I will point out that my front yard has one extraordinarily large crepe myrtle and one extraordinarily large dogwood that both shade the entire front of my property just fine.
Mrs. Lilly Hicks.
Overall, I'm excited about the project, especially burying the power lines. I think it's going to be a big deal. I'm thinking about the approach from the west. Mr. Joe was concerned about. I think we're going to see infill in that area from adjacent property owners. So I'm suspecting that that's a temporary issue, but I appreciate it being raised. Otherwise, I think we're on track here.
All right, Mr. Stolzberg, do you have anything to add, or would you like to craft the motion?
Oh, gosh.
He's still designing.
Yeah, geez, I'm just trying to Photoshop in a complete railing, which, wow, it looks great. So I, just on a couple of those topics that were raised, especially about piers, it reminded me that one concern we heard from council was this idea that this building is top heavy with the cantilever, and some part of me, when you guys agreed to step back the upper portions further from the road or setback, wish that you hadn't also moved back the first floor, because now you keep the cantilever even though you lost all that space. At the same time, I like the additional, actual room for seating and clear walk space and stuff. So I don't hate that idea, but I do wonder if having something like a column at the corner or a pier at the corner would give it a sense of like substantialness that makes it, look like it's not suspended by modern magic, because we're supposed to pretend that everything was built in the age of brick. But I mean, I don't have strong opinions there. I actually, on the upper portion and step backs, from a purely aesthetic point of view, sorry, was the step back, did you guys agree to that as part of the zoning? Is that right? Okay. I personally think that it detracts from the building and would detract more if it were greater. I look at a building like the Kenilworth, a great traditional building, 1725 JPA, that's what they're calling it now, where that upper cap is distinguished by color, but not by, it's not stepped back. And I just think it looks better. And it's the idea of upper story step backs always makes me think of the Waterhouse building, which in my view, which is of course objective, is one of the ugliest buildings in the whole city, and possibly in existence. So, I mean, that's my view on the step back situation. I mean, I get that people are asking for it, and maybe that would make them feel better, but I can only see it being detrimental. From the discussion of the well, I guess do we want to get to a conclusion on the idea of the vertical lines and the asymmetric situation? So I have a few choices for you guys of what you may have been talking about. So we sort of talked about this one, right? And maybe it would be helpful if I join the Zoom and show this on screen, or
I should be allowed to.
We've been getting Zoom invites recently. I don't know if that's why. So this is what we had talked about earlier versus all three of them potentially, because this one then makes these two look wrong, right? I don't know. And I hate the idea of drawing this on stage and that you guys would actually make changes to your building based on what I'm saying here. But I think that might also just be that every time we have an entrance corridor review, I get more and more nihilistic about the idea of entrance corridor reviews and the idea of any sort of objectivity in these sorts of things. And maybe it should all just be left to the architects, or maybe everyone should have to make a brick building with cornices, which I also lean towards.
I'm dying over here.
I think
Sometimes I go back.
I don't know.
I don't know.
To me, it seems Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems minor enough of a change on the
That it could be approved
elevation
administratively?
that they could just change it.
We
And
have had great conversations with everyone in the city and are happy to continue this conversation.
it's like a 2%
We
change.
can even change the rendering and show you what it looks like.
Also, 3 more panes of glass. So great, even if it's not functional.
So this has been a wonderful design session, but I'm counting on you to organize the motion.
Motion?
Yeah, and I'll help you because I've been watching all the different interests. So if you miss something, I'll help you with it.
Gosh, did we want anything beyond Jeff's proposed?
Well, we got two debate. We got a debate on the trees. We've got Mr. Habab who has one thought on trees, Mr. Schwartz who has another thought on trees, and we've got the rooftop screening that we need to think about.
It sounded like that was a bit moot, given where they're actually planning on putting the rooftop appurtenant stuff, or
I don't think there's a problem with you.
having the condition
Having
regardless.
it.
Do you guys have a problem with that condition with your plans for the rooftop appurtenances? Did you see the draft?
No, we actually put it. So we actually put a note on the drawings that said equipment will be screened from view, and the intent is that exactly what you're talking about. If you're on the street, there's a parapet, and they're located at the center of the roof that you can't see them. So we're happy to look in 3D in terms of the effects of
I
whether
think
you
it'd be
can or
safe
cannot
to
see them.
Add that into your conditions. So the only remaining debate beyond Jeff's recommendations are tree size.
So, Dan just left, but I mean, I was gonna say, since, I mean, we've got, planning department here, I don't need to push that, as long as everyone understands that's the goal. But,
And I totally, didn't come out of anything other than my alarm that we keep making spaces smaller, and we want to put trees there. And if a tree won't go there, but I'm not gonna say, oh, let's put a little, a shrub there. I want as big as we can get.
I guess my fear is just after all the site plan stuff gets finished up, there's a big water line running underneath all 4 trees, and we get nothing, except for something that's like, shrubbery, which that I think would be a problem. And I don't know if we have, as the entrance corridor review board, do we have an ability to prevent that?
Well, the condition presented explicitly says from the city tree list, not the city shrub list.
Yeah, sure. We don't use the word shrubbery, you know that.
The shrubs are on the tree list.
But
right?
I
Two separate
mean,
PDFs.
the fact remains, if there's something underground there, you can't put a tree on top of it. You can make them move the building, but you can't require that they put a tree on top of where it can't go. And so a little bit of trust here, but, and I said, there's a lot going on tonight that's going to be carried forward, and because this zoning ordinance is going to bring things like this, and we've spent almost an hour and a half on this, so it's going to be, there's a lot to think about.
See, if we had mandated that every building be the Wells Fargo building, we wouldn't have so much ambiguity.
As you guys have done your site plan process, I mean, how far have you dug into the burying the power lines and knowing how much room you have for utilities and things like that?
So the owner has engaged with a consultant for the purpose of determining that. They are having conversations with Dominion Energy right now about that. We've also had conversations with the civil engineer and the landscape architect and the entire design team discussing those specific trees and the intent behind them. And as we mentioned on the drawings, the intent is to coordinate with site plan review and entrance corridor review and with UVA to try to provide a consistent streetscape. So the intent is to provide the largest tree we can. And if I'm not mistaken, there's actually the street tree list, which dictates a certain size there. So we can only go so small. We're not going to. We want big trees, but we can't put teeny tiny dwarf crepe myrtles. We can't do that because they're not on the approved street tree list.
I guess it's maybe less distrust of you guys as it is just the site plan
The process. We also had a pre-app meeting with utilities.
So you've
discuss
already had
connections.
This, okay.
It's not 100% designed, but we are thinking about every aspect at this early phase.
Okay.
So do you have a condition
I
or
don't- I
wording
mean,
that you'd like to recommend?
Does anyone else feel like it needs to be in there other than me? Then no.
I guess I'm a little confused what you're proposing to put in there.
I'm not entirely sure. Just some sort of something that makes it
Big tree.
some encouragement that there's a bigger tree. But
Big of a tree
you
as
know what?
possible from the list. that will fit.
I'm fine with
How about
staff's.
that?
All right.
They seem happy
Yeah,
with that
sounds
idea.
good.
All right, Rory, go
So-
ahead. Make your motion, please.
All right. Having considered the standards set forth within the city's entrance corridor design guidelines, I move to find that the proposed design for 2117 Ivy Road is consistent with the guidelines and compatible with this entrance corridor, that the ERB approves a certificate of appropriateness application submitted with the following conditions of approval. The first,
You can refer to them.
second,
if you wish.
and third from the staff report. The fourth modified as follows. The street tree species, when selected, will be coordinated with UVA streetscape plan. UVA will meet city site plan requirements and, most importantly, will be from the city's tree list in the among the largest varieties available within the list and appropriate for the conditions / space above and below grade. And then in addition, no?
I think it's forcing that it's a. I'm okay. We'll leave it as staff has it. I think.
Yeah,
I'm okay with
I think
that.
once we start.
I'm gonna butcher it. Yeah.
So the four conditions in the staff report, plus an additional condition, all rooftop mechanical equipment will be located within the area of rooftop screening. The equipment will not be taller than the screening, and the screened equipment area will be no closer than
Pick one.
10 feet from the parapet? 10 feet from the parapet.
That's what I was guessing. And the.
It does say X feet, so maybe you're
Yeah,
just
I
using
know.
Latin Roman numerals.
That genetic memory from thousands of years ago. Balcony, the rod and clevis, the,
Let's talk about that.
and the decals, any,
All right, let's get a, if that's a motion, let's get a second, and then we can talk about those as amendments
Okay.
to
I'll
do
second.
proper procedure.
All right, we have a second. So
Carl.
we'll continue with discussion. Amendments.
So the rod and clevis, I have no strong opinions on, but if Michael doesn't like it, I'm fine with saying it's bad.
I reacted to the renderings that were provided, and I was trying to envision them added to the visualization, and my subjective take is that they would be a detractor to what we see currently in the visualization. So I feel like if they wanted them, they would have been in the initial visualization, so that was my take.
And are those are purely aesthetic? They're not like structurally holding up the balconies, right?
No, that's
No, they would be, okay.
Yeah.
good structure.
It's a tie-back rod that holds the base of the balcony up back to a knife plate that ties back into the structural elements of the building.
it's a play on the suspended balconies on the lawn, but we don't want to be doing anything Jeffersonian, I realize. Sorry, forgive my sarcasm.
Okay,
I think
guess
what I would
assume
say.
they were just like
Yeah, my condition.
faking being that, but okay.
I would say if they're used, that they're used consistently, but I don't think the guidelines say yes, no.
I would.
To add, we only have 4 balcony stacks, and they're all within the internal courtyard, so I mean. it's
Yeah, the problem is the
minor.
internal courtyard is the part that UVA has to see from their nice greenway. That's why they have such strong opinions on it, right?
I wouldn't say they're strong. It was just, again, having looked at the options, it's hard to make a case of how they would be an addition to the architectural merit of the building. So
I would strongly prefer you didn't have them, but I'm not sure it's going to make me change my vote. Just because it's busy and it does seem to. I mean, your renderings, as Commissioner Joy has said, are there glass railings, and yeah, you add the metal railings, and then you add these braces back, and it starts to become a kind of a dark, busy element on the facade. But I'm not going to change my vote over that.
All right, Rory, keep going.
Bless you.
So,
Anyone else?
I
I
think
mean, you don't have to change the vote, right? We can just add it as a condition.
is there an appetite to add that as a condition, to prohibit those?
Not from me.
I would be happier if it were prohibited.
Happier if they're prohibited. We've got,
I'd be happier. Yeah.
So-
we've got,
Right.
3.
I'm counting 3 happier if they were prohibited, plus a 4th non-voting happier if they were prohibited, 2 opposed to prohibiting them, and I No, I'm not the deciding vote here. I don't have any opinion.
So,
I think we're so lukewarm on this thing that we just ought to just keep going, leave it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leave it out.
We're pretty lukewarm.
this would be something that, in my correspondence with them, I would simply add a comment, staff comment. The ERB expressed
Concerns.
that a preference to not have
Yeah,
those.
and I mean, they could always come to us with an amendment.
Right,
With the
right.
rendering that showed
So-
them.
so I'm good with
might
that.
show
Well,
them
if you
not.
want to leave it out, it's good. I mean, I'm lukewarm.
And then the final issue is the wraps around the transformers. I mean, I'm certainly more pro-wrap than just having blink transformers there. Are those our alternatives, or is there something else? I mean, since we can't say you can't have the transformers there. Should
Freedom
we recognize the
transformers,
applicant?
you
It
could
looks
just
like they have
ride
something
on them.
they'd like to say.
Said you could make them like, somebody made a joke about a freedom wall or earlier. You could just make them freedom transformers.
Sorry.
Was that a
If
Saturday
there's a
morning
way to make
cartoon at
them-
one point?
I'd say you got to really nail that art. Find some bad artists to do the back wall and give them a chance to practice that no one will see. But I mean, you got to pull off something good there if you're going to put those giant boxes there. I think I would agree with. Can we recognize the applicant? They look very fancy over there.
So I just had a quick question about the art. I mean, again, this is more of the review process. The idea of having art on those. I mean, it sounds like it's not clear that it's even permissible by Dominion. And so, but if it is, and there's art that is designated, is there any further review by the city?
So the proposal was that we would say that could be administratively approved by Jeff.
Got it.
But maybe we could ask for that to come to us if you guys have an appetite for that. But I certainly don't want to be judging art.
I've only looked at one art piece in an entrance corridor. And all I had to do, that was at Barracks Road, and I just said, don't put your logo on it. So I'm okay with it. I just, I just want to make sure that, a year from now, or whenever this happens, it's suddenly not, people aren't going, oh my God, cry foul, you guys
Can't
snuck in
believe
these
Jeff
transformers.
approved
All right,
that
let's
chartreuse box.
get the applicant to Diane to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Valerie Long, also working with the applicant. We're happy to do whatever is your preference. As Mr. Freeze can attest, this was an issue he and Mr. O'Connell raised early on, the transformers in that location. We explained there was nowhere else to put them. The offer to wrap them was an effort to help mitigate the impacts of them being in that location. But I can appreciate the concerns that that is an important design and something could work really well or not. If it is the preference, we can leave them alone and it would be whatever color they come in, and maybe that helps them blend in more.
Not attempting to
We
influence
just
your
wanted to-
motion, but I think I would certainly like rather defer to Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would not want to prohibit the wraps. I think it would be hard to mess up the art so badly that it's worse than the green
Basic.
box that you're going to get from Dominion. If they're going to allow it.
Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, I'll just note, so I was the one who suggested wrapping the boxes based on experience in a prior community where we had a community art program. We wrapped all the utility boxes in the right of way in the city, so.
You probably had a better utility than Dominion, though.
And that may be true, right? I was different state, but theoretically, it's possible.
Maybe we can, certainly administratively at a bare minimum, put forward some proposals. Here's what we're thinking, get some critique, maybe some options. We want it to look good as well. So, but I just want to mention that we're flexible. And if I may, there may be, Julie, the architect, may have some comments about the balcony. Forgive me the precise terminology.
The rod and clevis?
The rod and clevises.
It's a new one for
in
me.
terms of.
I thought we resolved.
We're
We don't
leaving
want
that.
in there.
That's
We're
out.
leaving it alone.
Yeah.
Do it the way you've got it done.
To allow it to be as proposed?
We did not prohibit them.
Oh, thank you, because I thought that you did.
Yeah.
Forgive me.
We were
Thank you.
close.
Okay, because they are
All
structural
right, come on,
elements.
hurry, wrap this thing up.
We don't have any amendments to propose, so I guess we'll call the question.
All right, Ms. Creasy, are you good with everything? You think you clearly understand pretty much what Jeff has recommended? Okay. All right, Ms. Creasy, would you poll the board?
Sure. Mr. Solly Yates?
Aye.
Mr. Duranzio?
Aye.
Mr. Stolzenberg?
Aye.
Mr. Havab,
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
and Mr. Mitchell.
And aye.
Okay.
Right, thank you very much.
I love aesthetic reviews.
Would you guys like to take a 5-minute break, or you want to?
I think that's,
5-minute break.
I appreciate that.
5-minute break. Okay, we will be in recess for 5 minutes.
Roy, I want you to know that BAR never takes that long in an application.
That's,
That's what you get for asking me my architectural opinions. Get a screed about
All right, we are back in order, and I think Mr. Warner will lead us in our conversation.
And I will, and I think, to just address, we had a really lengthy conversation about a lot of details, and so and that's what this discussion is going to be about. What do you all want to see when this project comes to you, and possibly in a month? So it was instructive earlier, and I think carry that forward, because there are a whole lot more walls involved with the Verve than the 4 or 5 at 2117. And I think you all also, Rory and I have been corresponding today with some questions about the prior project, but this is exactly where, renderings serve a purpose, but they are not, I use them to illustrate the project, but what I want, when something comes in for the building permit, I'm looking at the building elevations and the wall sections. So the rendering is artwork and goes by the wayside unless it conflicts. But it is something, for example, I know for the Verve and for 2117, there's almost an optical illusion. You see some bending of the walls. So they are imperfect and needs to be understood that way. I think, as I said, you guys just had the most detailed discussion I've ever experienced with the ERB. And this gets to where, moving forward, preliminary discussions are not, we don't currently do them normally, like with the BAR, but I think that this is going to have to be something that we work into it, particularly if we do get the projects that at least over by the university that we're anticipating. And we do have to evaluate. We are due to review our design guidelines, so that's another thing to keep in mind. So quickly, and this again is a project that you all are a lot more familiar with than I am relative to what's been designed and improved as part of the City Council's decision. But again, this was a PUD approved under the prior zoning, and so references are to that zoning. You all are the Entrance Corridor Review Board. This project is in an entrance corridor and requires a COA. There are it's a multi-parcel project. Three of those parcels are not within the entrance corridor, but because this is a single project, then the entire entrance corridor provisions apply to everything. So, and if there had been a historic property on this previously, if that had not been removed, then this entire project would actually have been reviewed by the BAR. So, but just to be clear, not all of the parcels are entrance corridor. I actually tried. And then, and primarily what the goal for tonight is, you all last saw this, I think October, November. City Council saw a version of it in December and earlier this year. So there have been some changes to that design. So I asked the applicant to just summarize what's changed. To not make this, they're not here presenting this, they're not here saying, walking through every elevation, but to at least to highlight what's changed. Second is when they come forward with a formal submittal, what information, and they can ask some specific questions, but what level of detail do you want to see? You don't have to respond. You all can, thank them for their time and wrap up. And then, but I think it gets to where, renderings versus elevations versus construction drawings. And there's a lot happening at the Verve. Now's the time to sort of set the table for what they're going to prepare and bring to you. And I use the word for a successful submittal. That doesn't mean we're going to do this so that, it's guaranteed an approval. But that is the goal, is to a project that can be approved by the entrance corridor. So that means something that's complete relative to what you all want to see. And no formal action tonight. You don't have to, there's no motion, there's no action. You all can thank them for their time. And but I said, keep it short and sweet, and then leave it to you, Mr. Mitchell, to kind of guide the discussion. If you have any questions, I'll help, but really, this is your game. Did we find our Zoom-in friends? Missy, are they?
Ms. Chrissy, you said they're there, and
Mr. Reardon, Mr. Lombard, and those are the
Great.
only
yeah, I
two.
think Mr. Reardon is going to kick off the presentation.
Okay.
I'll start.
I will.
Yeah, there we go. And just for refresher, Neil Reardon is with ESG Architects out of Minnesota, and he has been here before. He's not able to have his camera on because he's in transit, but just to put a name with a face, or maybe he can, but I'll let him take it from here. Thank you, Neil.
All right, good evening, Mr. Reardon.
Hello, and thank you for having us. I am here remotely. Thank you for having us that way, and thank you for allowing us to introduce this project. I think, as Jeff summarized, it's helpful for us to show you what's changed at a minimum, and then answer any questions you have and get any feedback on what you might want to see. Our intention is to be there next month in person and present to you in a similar scope as to the previous project that was there in front of you this evening. So very much looking forward to that and hearing that discussion. And as Jeff mentioned, your very detailed conversation about it was helpful for us. So what I'll do here first is just go through just a brief amount of slides for you, showing you what's changed. Again, we were in front of you in October of 2023, and then this project was heard in front of the City Council as a modified version based on your input in October, and that was heard in December, and eventually the PUD was approved by the City Council, as you know. So maybe go to page 2, and I'll have some before and afters for everybody to see. So what we're looking at here is the main view from the northwest of the project. And this is the October version that you all saw and offered input on. What we did then, if you want to slide to page 3, is the after. So we revised the building in pretty dramatic ways. We now have 2 buildings. And so on the site, we have a west building, which you see on the right-hand side there, which kind of bends around the curve where JPA and Emmett, where Stadium Road and Emmett meet. And then there's a void where the building is joined just at the first 2 stories with a mini market and a main entrance to the complex. And then there's a building on the north, which we're calling the North Building, just 11 stories. And that's the building you see on the left-hand side of this image. So we created this void, really modified significantly the exterior materials from what you saw in October. And so this is the update, if you will. So maybe go to another view here, and I'll articulate kind of that change as well. So this view is from the northeast of the site, and this view captures the angle and what I call the pork chop there at the road at where Emmett and JPA meet. So JPA is on your left and Emmett is on your right as it proceeds west. So this before option had quite a bit going on. There was lots of different volumes and lots of different materials. And what we did when we made some moves elsewhere on the site that you've already seen is, if you want to slide to the next page, is really simplify that massing and materiality. This is the 11-story building that is the north building that fronts Emmett. And what we did was really regularize that rather than have so much going on. And then on the left-hand side of this, you see what has mostly remained the same, although the material cladding and design choices have changed, but the massing was very similar. And we're calling this the East Building. And this is really the building that fronts JPA. And so as JPA lowers in grade, this part of the project is anywhere from 6 stories down to 8 stories. And that's because JPA sort of slopes down as it goes south. Next slide. This view is from the southwest of the project. So this would be looking north on Stadium Road. And you can see our kind of end profile of the west building located here. And so this was the previous version. And we did make some significant massing changes to this part of the west building. So if you slide forward to the new, the building is essentially the same size, up top. But what we did is contextually sort of match some datum lines across the street and taper a step back where you see the black massing change to the gray and gold tone massing. And that was intentional to try to align better with all the other things we have going on along Montebello. So the goal on Montebello was to kind of hit at the 3-story datum line. As you know, Montebello has a higher grade than the rest of the site. So the buildings that front on the Montebello side are really in the area of 3 or 3.5 stories. And then what you see there above that is the 12-story portion of the west building that again fronts the Stadium Road. I think that is kind of, if you want to go forward to the next slide, I believe that is kind of the summary for us tonight. What you see there lastly is just a straight-on view of the JPA side, and wanted to end here as Jeff articulated. Part of the project is within the entrance review scope, but the part that is most applicable to the entrance review, to the entrance corridor, is of course the JPA side. So we wanted to make sure we have some other angles and imagery we'll bring forward next month to you, but wanted to leave it here and really open up a discussion, if you have it, for any detailed questions on what's changed first, and then secondarily, just information that would be helpful to bring to next month's discussion. So thank you for your time, and happy to answer questions and
So I think
have back and forth if needed.
I think we'll begin with UVA, but before we toss the ball to Mr. Joy, are we going to be able to see the top of this building from the lawn?
Thank you for asking that question. Yes, I can summarize that for you. We have produced diagrams, and we'd be happy to bring them with next month if it's helpful. We have produced diagrams that illustrate that this building is not seen from the lawn. That was a request when we reached out to UVA about just generally the dialogue we had with them, and we have those diagrams. I believe they may have been brought up during a portion of one of the previous public hearings, possibly at City Council, but certainly could bring those again next month.
Thank you. Well, first off, I just want to thank you for sort of taking us through the before and afters. It's very helpful. And I wanted to commend the team on sort of just the market improvement that is being proposed from the before and after. I think it's a commendable change, and I particularly appreciate the willingness of the team to listen to the concerns that came out of the community and from City Council and other members, and to sort of be willing to sort of make adjustments to the design accordingly. Since we have limited materials to look at here, and we're primarily looking at renderings, and it seems like there's still a lot of development going on, I'm going to just focus my comments on kind of overall massing. And again, as we walk through the slides, I think the first before at the northwest corner, again, I think that it's really been, this is slides 2 and 3. That transition, I think, is tremendous, and I appreciate the scaling down and the articulation of these two buildings with the gap in between. I think that's a successful move at helping sort of bring, to make this building, again, feel a little bit more contextual. The next slide, when we get to 4 and 5, where we're looking at the JPA and Emmett Street, for many folks here in town, this will probably be their first sort of visual contact with the building. And I have to say that the design is, again, seriously improved, I think, in the new scheme, and clarified and simplified. I'm a little remiss that there is a lack of step back in any capacity. And what I'm referring to is if you go to slides 6 and 7, where you've made sort of a thoughtful adjustment to bring some datum line and some contextualization to Montebello, I sort of kind of see an opportunity for a similar type of articulation at JPA and Emmett. Again, just to help mitigate that initial articulation with the adjoining buildings as you scale up to the full height of the development. So that really is the extent of my comments. Again, I look forward to seeing more about what the actual material palette is and elevations and plans so that I can delve in deeper to provide feedback. But again, thanks. I can't say enough how I appreciate the effort to rethink this project. So thank you.
And thank you. Mr. Stolzenberg.
You sure you guys want to hear from me? No, I do agree that it is just leagues better than it was before. I think the massing looks very good now. I think I've said maybe last time you guys were here that a building looks better when it is taller than it is wide. And so I appreciate that the building was split into two, but also that you now have these different segments of that building with these full height recesses that differentiate them. Where I think I think the outside of the buildings or the shape of the buildings look much better than before, and I'm very happy with that. I don't love all the cladding choices, though I will say I hated all of the old cladding choices. Mainly the thing that's just eating at me, and take this for what it is, which is my sole opinion as a guy who doesn't even believe that aesthetic review is a valid thing to do, but the whole alternating the cladding from one side to the other as you go up. And I'm talking here about the light colored cladding. And I kind of like how it's, you have that horizontal bar every 2 stories, which makes it kind of visually look shorter, but then those vertical elements between the windows and how those are alternating. It's not nearly as bad as how you were alternating it last time with the black and white, which was like practically seizure inducing. But I guess my question for you is, does that serve a purpose? Like, is this like a technique, like an architecture technique that I just don't know about because I am a layman who has no reason or business to be commenting on these things? I see Kareem nodding his head, so that's a question for you guys.
I think that was to the appropriateness of your comment.
So who are you asking? You asking
This is the applicant. Yeah, why did you do this alternating sides, if you understand what I'm talking about here, or I'm referencing?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I do understand. Happy to answer that. Really, the alternating, I think, aspect you're talking about in the gold that we're seeing on the screen right now is in a 2-story configuration. And the reason we do that in the 2-story configuration is really to break down the scale of that 12-story volume, I guess, or in this case, what we're looking at right here on screen is 8 stories of that particular arrangement. So the pairing of 2 floors together helps break down the scale, and in the eye of the audience or the person experiencing it from the street, it lessens the ability, it lessens the height that they have to perceive from that angle. So that is the intent of arranging them in a 2-story.
So I get that, but it seems like they're already arranged in a 2-story configuration by those horizontal lines, right? So why does it's sort of the gold and silver pattern alternate? Or is that what you're explaining, or
Yeah. What it does is create a module of 2 horizontal levels together, of which the dark black banding in between windows spans the gap of or creates that. And then I guess to more finely articulate, I think what you're mentioning is like, why does it not align purely vertically? And that is intentional. So the 3 tones of gold or gray here change in order to create that 2-story volume. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I kind of hate it, and I feel like you did the 2-story volume already with the lines, but I'm not going to belabor the point, and I have no idea if anyone agrees with me. And again, my opinions shouldn't matter. But the last thing I would say is just I'd like to see a lot more renderings from the street level, especially like standing next to the building in front of it. especially like along JPA and Emmett. Obviously, this is not your application, but to me, that is the most important part of how a building is experienced. And I would just like to be able to, see that. In particular, if looking at that sort of, if you're looking at the main entrance, and then you have the large building to the right, and then the second sort of pseudo building, the second gold and silver pseudo building there, it looks like that's a big blank wall there at ground level. Oh, this is page 3.
Oh, he's zoomed in really far.
So this right here.
Sorry, now I have crashed.
I don't know.
Dave, if you could scroll back to.
It's page 78 of the packet, if that's helpful. Sorry. No, it's fine. I'll get it later. I wouldn't worry about it. I don't think you need to go there, but especially where there are blank walls, I want to see renderings of it, and ideally I want to see you not have long blank walls and or mitigate them somehow. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, we hear you, and we very much intend to bring those with next month and have those angles. I do know the area you're talking about along Stadium that you're mentioning, so I'm looking at it here, and we'll be sure to articulate what that design is as it faces the public realm. That's important for next month.
Okay. Wait, very last question quickly. Why do you have a different Verve logo here than you guys use everywhere else, from what I can tell? It's a beautiful logo you have in Madison and everywhere else.
Yes, I can take a stab at that, and Dylan is on the line as well. But we the logo has evolved as a brand for the client, and it is used, as you know, elsewhere in other products around the country, particularly in major universities. So it's just slightly been tweaked, and the most recent version is what you saw here, I think. So.
Oof. Okay. Yeah.
The word that came to me when I was looking at these changes was lucid. I think this is a more lucid design. I understand more clearly what you're trying to do, and I think it makes more visual sense. So thank you. I'm happy to see that. I'd echo Mr. Stolzenberg's comments about understanding the pedestrian experience. This is a very heavily trafficked area for pedestrians, especially JPA and Emmett. So especially understanding that experience would be helpful. I guess my first question going into this was, what do you want from us? What would be helpful for you to hear from us?
Well, actually, hearing the discussion on the previous project was really helpful. I think we have notes from that, with like site elements, site lighting, the clunky things on the site, such as generators and transformers. We have plans for all of those, and articulating how we're addressing those things sounds like an important thing to discuss with you all next week. It's really the public realm pieces and the details of those to a higher degree than was scrutinized at the PUD level. So that's how I would summarize that. But I guess if there's anything particular that is project specific to what I just mentioned, we'd love to hear it now if you have it.
I think overall it makes sense. I'm not concerned about the materials. I agree with the two-story chunking. I agree that makes visual sense and is easier to digest. Overall, good work. Thank you.
Mr. Duranzia.
Thus far, I'd be essentially echoing the comments heard thus far. I've got nothing substantive and new to say that hasn't been already expressed.
Yeah, I love it a lot more than the previous design. It feels a lot less of a jumble, highlighting the verticality, like Commissioner Stolzenberg said, with the materials and the recesses, the two-story levels with the horizontal banding. I do like the alternating panels because I feel like they help break down the scale. If it was repetitive, all the way up, I think that would highlight a bigger solid block. And keeping them in the same shade of color is nice, so it doesn't look too much of a mess visually. Do you know what material you're using? It looks like it's black brick with black storefront or windows, and then for the panels, I couldn't tell if it was cement or metal paneling. What are you thinking there?
Yeah, we're exploring a few things on the upper on the three-tone material. We're exploring a couple different material types for there right now, but we plan to bring that to you next month and clearly state what that is. But we've always thought about it as a metal panel to date on the three-story, on the three-tone material. The I call it gray to gold. And then your other question was the charcoal volume. So the charcoal volume is a masonry at the base. We are looking at how to articulate again the best version of that as it goes up. So we'll bring that with next month. But in terms of color and tones, we plan to stick with and not alter from what these renderings are here today. So, but a more detailed version of materiality and jointing pattern, I think, is something you guys expect and asked for in the last project. So we will plan to show you some of those details in our upcoming submittal.
Thank you. And on that masonry, I really think the way you have the coursing and the soldier coursing and the different coursing between the windows is really nice. So hopefully you can keep that as presented. If you can, we talked a little bit about trees in our previous application. If you have more information about that when you come back to us, it'd be nice to see. And last thing, I had a question. I don't remember the site plan exactly off the top of my head, the one that's approved, but on page 3, there's a picture of a car right on that corner. Is there a driveway there? It's parked right in front of, right next, like bottom right from the Verve logo.
Sure. On page 3 of that rendering, if we go there, we can maybe point at which car we're talking about, just to make sure I'm talking about the right one. There is a triangular green island here, so I'm wondering if it's the...
Zoom in really far. It looks like it's parked in a little driveway.
It's a page. Go back 4 pages.
It's a display.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I think page 3 is where we want to be.
It's page 78 of the packet.
Got a lot of students from New Jersey over TVA.
And then,
Yeah, if you zoom in, it's like Where's Waldo?
Sure. And I think if you zoom in on the area that's being brought up, it looks like there's a car coming out of the building.
Yes.
Maybe to the right of there, it'd be kind of in the background, not up front.
Yes.
And if that's the area, yeah, there is a porte cochere here where we pull in off of JPA and then we exit where that car is coming out. So that is a drop-off zone intended for leasing arrivals, visitors, as well as deliveries and all of those functions to bring those off the street. So.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, basically to echo a lot of the comments that have been said, I do appreciate the color variation, as long as you keep it subtle. I agree, it is creating these, it's breaking down the mass in the way that you had suggested. I'm going to be very interested in the materials that you choose. I agree that the brick I think it helps. It's a rich material, and the way that you're using it is being used with a whole lot of detail. And I believe that although you're using it kind of sparingly in some kind of small thin towers, I think that goes a long way in adding some richness to the building. And these metal panels, yeah, I'd love to know how the joints are detailed. I would really hate to see this thing turn into a large fiber cement building. And if you did that, I'd be really concerned about wanting to know what the joints are, just because it's, I don't think it's your intention, but I mean, we've seen some fiber cement buildings where you see a whole lot of flashing everywhere, or you see the battens and stuff, and that doesn't seem like anything you guys are gonna be doing, but just if it, comes down to it, that would be really sad. I agree with Commissioner Joy's comments on the JPA side. And it might just be kind of an optical illusion because it is the smallest side. The buildings are much shorter on that side, so maybe they look a lot wider, but it does feel in some of your renderings to be fairly massive for its context. And I don't know if there's a way, if you guys could just look at that and make sure that it's, you think you are still breaking down the mass sufficiently for the JPA side, which is a more residential side. I think that was it. Yeah.
Right, Mr. Joy.
Yeah, I just had one additional comment that I forgot to touch on in my previous remarks, and it has to do with you have a very clear, strong, activated base. I think we've talked about the sort of success of the articulation in the middle, and I think in certain areas you have a nice transition to express a top, and I know looking at the entrance corridor design guidelines, there's a general desire to have a clear delineation of a top of a building, and so I would just ask, as you kind of begin to refine the design in some of these instances, particularly where you have the two-tone kind of gold panel, that parapet condition, it doesn't seem like it has as much sort of attenuation that the brick masses have. And so I just think there could be an opportunity to think about how this building meets the sky.
Right, I won't be redundant. I'll just suggest that I applaud the revisions. I like what you've done here. What questions do you guys have for us? What other questions?
Thank you for asking. I don't have any further at this time. I think this has been very fruitful tonight in illustrating what we can bring with in a month from now to have a robust discussion with you then. So thank you.
All right, and thank you very much. So I'm gathering us out of the ECRB. We're back in the Planning Commission session, and Mr. You have something yet? We're still in the ECRB, by the way.
Well, no. It's okay. Good. You're all the same people anyway, and this is just a sort of what do things would be helpful to you. Would you guys like printed versions of this? Not everybody is comfortable, as Rory, reviewing architectural.
I personally would love to get a
printed
version.
But if it would, I mean, we're not requesting that now, but I can easily ask, provide some, and maybe something larger. I don't know. So give some thought to that. If you want to see printed material, we'll make it available, or you can come in and we can look at it on the giant TV in neighborhood development.
What I would love to see is material samples. If I know the BAR gets those, they're very fun. If they're sitting on the architect's desk anyway, toss them in the carry-on and let us see them, because
so the question,
sometimes the renderings do not.
The thing in the past with you all has been, I've been chastised by the Planning Commission for bringing something to the meeting that they didn't see beforehand, and I never knew how quite to get past that.
Yeah, we do get mad about that. That's true.
I think it's helpful to see and touch and feel, but it just, as long as you guys don't yell at me, they're more than happy to bring things. But
tell them to give it to you a week beforehand, I guess. It's harder
the point
if they're
being
in Indianapolis.
We can show,
I ordered some Ceraclad
right,
samples.
we can show the material palette on a sheet, and then I can bring the actual brick.
Yeah.
It's not something new, but there were some contentious moments in the past that made it, I guess I could, but those are the things I would ask, communicate with me as soon as you can, and I know that there's a lot more formality with the ERB in accepting things, but with the BAR, sometimes I'll get something out as soon as I've got it and just say, hey, take a look. What do you guys think? Any questions? Get them to me, and then I can begin to tackle things ahead of the meeting, because that's my job. I'm the cruise director, and the more questions you get to me ahead of time, we can resolve. But that's all I wanted to offer. Thank you for your time tonight. I would say I know, sorry.
Yeah, I guess I had one thing to say, and it's more related to the Ivy application. I wish there were more renders. I know they're not the official, we're looking at elevations, but they do help us understand, and there are only 2, and it's such a, important spot. And I also wish they were representative of what their actual designs are. And that, to me, kind of left a little sore spot.
Except this is an evolution of a level of detail that the Planning Commission has never requested. And so it has been a sort of a tension on my part of saying, well, what do they want? In the past, they hadn't wanted a whole lot.
So I'd also say, most of the time I feel like I have not wanted all those things, but these particular projects are of such a size and importance in place that I feel like they just need more. I need to consider them harder.
No doubt. We've not seen anything of this scale. And I think one thing we could think about, and it's not in the design guidelines, if we are going to start to see these buildings continue, one next to the other, how do you treat those ends? Because I can tell you that the building that goes up next to it, the person who will scream the loudest will be the tenants of this building. And so, how, acknowledging as we go that what you see here is you're going to see something next to it, and how those two relate to one another is something to think about. But thank you for your time tonight.
All right, we are, again, the CRP is now, session is now closed. We're back in the planning commission session. Mr. DeFrancio, is there something you'd like to do for us?
Oh, we at that point.
We are.
Well, all right, now, Mr. Chair, I'd like to join in other commissioners in wishing you a happy birthday.
Thank you.
And I point out that it has coincidentally fallen on Mardi Gras, so you do with the rest of your evening what you will. But that wasn't what I intended to speak on. There's been a church in the city of Ely that since the 7th century in Cambridgeshire, England, and it was greatly expanded in the late 11th and early 12th century. And in the interest of good city planning and in an effort to preserve the original structure, in 1321 they started building an expansion next to it that they called the Lady Chapel, and it was going to be the new Lady Chapel. And on February 13th, 1322, the main spire, probably because they disturbed the foundation of the whole thing, collapsed. And they went about, in terms of preserving the structure, they didn't try to rebuild the spire. They built a beautiful octagonal nave that is drags people, 250,000 people from around the world to see it to this day. How does this figure into our discussions here? One, about preserving existing structures and our desire to do that as we move forward. And secondly, on the quality of materials. In the late 11th century and early 12th century, the materials were quarried from a neighboring abbey in Peterborough, and it was leased. The quarry was leased by them for the payment of 8,000 eels every year. And I'd just like to point out that I know the cost of construction materials have gone up, but let's not devolve to bartering fish for concrete. And with that, we should adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Don't ask me how many.
Happy birthday, I'll say that.